Measurements on these, each front end is actually made to fit. Generally speaking, they're overall from here to the axle 38 to 40 inches or so, maybe just a tad bit shorter. It just depends on the angle of the head. That's what determines their length. So this top piece here, the front end itself on this one is 35 inches, which is from here, the top, down to right here, plus a couple of inches for the claw. And that does not include the suspension, because that's not the front end, that's the suspension. They're different parts. They're not one part. So this is a girder, a solid steel girder front end with a leading link single monoshock in the center. The bail is on the top rather than down below, but I put them on the top, which allows me to put the shock right here. A single shock, and a single shock in the center like this works just exactly the same as two shocks on the sides. It's much cleaner looking. It looks a lot lighter. It is lighter because there's much less metal, and it also means that if your shock fails completely, this bail will come down to there and stop. If you have the bail down below, you know, like everybody else's front ends, if the shocks fail, this goes to the ground, and it'll go all the way to the ground, and you're not going anywhere. But on this one, if it just drops to there, so it drops to there, so what? You just keep right on going, and when you get home, you can fix it. No big deal. The handlebars are solid steel, and I usually start with about 36 inches of length for the individual bars, and then put the bends in them. And how much you bend it is pretty much personal preference. I kind of like the way I got these bent. They look real nice. And then this round stuff is usually cut right here, and then from there out is the 1 inch or 7/8, whatever bars you want to run, whatever grips you want to run, either 1 inch or 7/8, and that's welded onto the end there. This particular front end is an unusual one in that it's all 7/8 rather than 3/4, which is my normal, is 3/4 inch round, square, or hex. But this one happened to be 7/8, so we just ran it right on it, and handlebars fit right on, I mean the grips fit right on, no problem. And the handlebars, this whole part all the way down to here is built on the bench, and then it's applied to the scooter. One thing I got to say is that this weld here, you can see where I've got this extra piece right here, and this weld here is probably one of the most critical welds on the whole scooter, because your life is in your hands, literally right there. Don't want your handlebars breaking off. So I put a super duper weld there, just weld the daylights out of it, and it's welded all the way around, and this extra piece here is just to add extra meat to that weld. Need to be able to lift the whole entire scooter by the handlebars. It should be that strong, so that if you were standing over the scooter, you could jump this thing up, you could lift this thing up and pull the whole scooter up. It needs to be that strong, in my view. So that's for that measurement. These pedals, standard set of pedals. This is steel that came from the old style garage door openers, you know, the kind where you had springs on the side of the garage door. This is the steel that the spring hooked to. That's why all these holes are there. It's really good stuff. It's usually free because you can get it for nothing. People throw them away, and it's very good steel. And that steel, if you get a pair, there's enough in a pair to make a set of pedals, and a few other pieces like this piece here. There's enough for that, and these, and sometimes even this piece you can do out of that. And if you have enough of it, you can do the straps out of that too. So it's a very usable piece, and like I said, it's really, really good, good steel, good quality steel. Anyway, these are 17 inches, and they come straight up, and there's a slight bend here which gets the pedal away from the frame, and then another bend here, which is where your foot goes. And when you put these together, you take a piece like a level or something that goes all the way across, clamp it on both of them all the way across before you do any welding down there, and that makes sure that they're exactly level to each other and straight and square and everything. And just run a piece across, and it's in some of my other videos, how I built pedals, that video there. So these are, like I said, 17 inches. And then this is pretty much a standard. You just build a little pillar, drill a hole in it for, I like 9/16. I don't want to go any smaller than 9/16 for this bar going across. A 1/2 inch would bend. You know, you run the risk of bending it. If you slammed on the brakes too much, you might bend that. So 9/16, and then find some tubing that goes over it so that you know, you have a setup there. You need to look at my pedal video to see how that's done. Very, very simple setup. All right, another thing is the width of the front end is 7 inches. That's the actual width of the front end. It's also the width of the triple trees. And it's real important that when you build the front end, that they are exactly the same as the triple tree width, so that that way the straps, these straps sit on flat. You know, they're not out of whack there, so they sit flat up against it. You know, this plane has to match this plane exactly. So, and the lower straps are generally, this is what, 3.5. Let me measure that real quick. So when you build the front end and set it up, this is 3.5 inches, and holes are punched at the appropriate. You want to leave about 3/16 or maybe 1/4 inch or less around that of a gap in there, which allows you to move your front end back and forth without so that those don't touch each other. So you get this all set up, you build all of that, you get this on the scooter, your triple trees are already on. And then once that's set, once you get the bottom strap on and your axle, your wheel is on, and all of that's there, then you come back here and then you measure what this needs to be, hole to hole. You measure this hole to hole, and then cut and drill the straps accordingly. Because these straps could be, you know, longer or shorter depending on the angle that the front end winds up being, which is determined by where pad point is, where your axle is, and all of that is determined also by the angle. The angle of this head is set according to a line of sight. So the driver sits in the seat and his eyeballs looks down this head. Okay, you want to look directly right through the center of this head so that you see a perfect zero all the way through, and then you follow that line right where his eyeballs go to this point on the ground right there. And that point on the ground is directly over the axle, and that's called pad point. That spot there, it's called pad point. Okay, so that's the pad, where the pad of the tire sits, that's pad point. Okay, so you want to be, ideally, that point should be right dead under this, under the axle. That's perfect. And the nice thing about these front ends is they're adjustable. You just loosen these bolts on both sides, and then you can move the front end forward or after in order to move this point, this pad point. You can be in front of it or behind it a little bit. I personally like being about that far in front of pad point. Maybe an inch, inch and a half or so, somewhere right along in there. That's where I like to be. Makes the front end a little bit lighter feeling, and so that's how that goes. As far as the actual angle itself, couldn't tell you. Doesn't matter. I don't care. It's not, I don't do it by the actual angle. I do it by, like I said, line of sight. That's how I do it. And it works really good because that allows you to have your handlebars directly in line with your front end, which means that that your front end, your handlebars stay directly in front of you. They don't go out to the side. They stay right in front of you when you're turning the wheel. And these wheels don't turn anyways, they lay over. Which, if you've ever watched motorcycle racing, this is how they get around the curves. They don't turn, those bikes don't turn, they lay over. And that's what this does. It lays over. And when it does that, the gyroscope draws whatever is behind it, i.e. the trike, it just sucks it right through the corner. And it causes these things to corner really freaking good. I'm telling you, you haven't freaking cornered until you've cornered on one of these, because they fly around the curves. Literally, they fly around curves really, really good. And that's what these are all about, is cornering. I don't give a crap about chrome. I don't give a shit about show. I'm not into plastic bodywork. Don't give a shit about none of that. I care about performance, strength, and cornering. So that's where that's at. Now, I don't think there's any other measurements that are critical right now. Everything else is just measure it, and make it work, whatever, the little things. So I think that's all the important measurements.